Welcome back to the Made by Google podcast. I'm your host, Rashid Finch, and this is the podcast where you hear the stories from the people that build many of Google's products. And today, we're heading back home. You probably noticed that the Google Home app got a big redesign. In fact, we talked about this a while back when the changes were still in preview for those who wanted to try it out early. But now the new Google Home app is there for everyone. So I wanted to find out what changed between the preview and the real thing. And I'd love to hear what's next for Google Home. So really excited to welcome back our Director of Product Management for Google Home and Nest, Anish Kattukaran. Anish, welcome back. And just for the people who didn't catch our previous get-together, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Hey, Rashid. First of all, thanks for having me back on the pod again.
Of course.
I had a blast last time. It was actually one of my first podcasts, so I'm really excited for this second go around. My name is Anish Kattukaran. I'm the Director of Product for Google Home and Nest. So I actually started out my career working on launching new mobile apps at a couple startups. One was in gaming, the other was in sort of mobile payments. Now this was, in the early days of the Play Store and the App Store, so it's been a little while. And I've spent a good few years now at Google since working on a number of products like YouTube. So 2 years ago, when I was approached to lead the overhaul and redesign of the Home app, it was just a really incredible opportunity. And so as I reflect on those two apps that I mentioned earlier, both were early in their product lifecycle, both were newer concepts. We were working to find product market fit, understand what users would actually do with those apps to keep them coming back. With the Home app, this is completely different, right? The app is already beloved by tens of millions of active users. It serves a real utility for those users every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally have been one of them. From being one of the first users of the very first Nest thermostat, user of one of the first, the Google Chromecasts, one of the first Google Home speakers. So, this redesign, really, really near and dear to my heart. And I'm just super thrilled to be back on here to chat about where we are and what we're going to do on that journey.
And we'll get to that redesign in a minute. But as you probably know, Anish, we always like to ask our guests what's in their Google internal directory. So, we can look up any Googler and they all have like this little mission statement. And yours says, build the most delightful and helpful experiences for the Google Home platform. I guess most people understand the first part of that. But what exactly entails the whole Google Home platform? What is that?
So to build the most delightful and helpful experiences for Google Home users, we've updated that a little bit. I think of this charter as both for myself and for my team. And you can sort of very easily get into a bit of a trap where, when you lead an app with tens of millions of users, to get lost in the data, to be steered by averages and P50s or P90s. And you can sometimes lose sight of the fact that there are real people on the other end relying on our app to feel safe and secure, to know what's going on in their home, or just to turn on the lights at night, right? Now, don't get me wrong, we're incredibly data-driven, but this charter is in a way to bring balance to that. And the one thing that I'll add to that is, for me, delight starts with just sort of nailing the basics, right? There's a kind of delight that you get when things just work, and they should very much be the starting point of delighting our users. So that's how I think about our charter.
So the last time we spoke, a redesign for the Google Home app was underway. It was available as a preview for people who signed up for that. Now it's sort of out of the gate. Everyone can use it. So what sort of happened in between? What was it you were working on since our last conversation?
When we talk about why we redesigned the app, actually, that might be a good place to start,
Sure.
right? There's the what, but the why is, I think, just as important. So, while the smart home has been around for a while, and Nest in many ways was a pioneer here, in a lot of ways, we're still in the earlier days of adoption of the smart home. So as we looked at our user data, on the one hand, we had these users that were buying their first smart home devices, complete novices, right? And in contrast, some of our earliest adopters had 40, 50, 100 plus smart home devices in their app. So our users had these sort of vastly different needs of the Google Home app. New users just needed this absolute simplicity. And our most advanced users, kind of where we actually see the entire smart home user base going over time, needed our app to grow with them as their homes and its devices grew. So you add to the fact that home is an incredibly personal space that people configure in a million different ways. And for us, the realization was that the old version of the app just wasn't built and designed to serve such distinct needs or give folks the ability to make it their own, right? So back to the question of the what, we went about redesigning the app, we brought it to preview, and if we were to compare this to sort of like an actual home renovation, this would be, consider it a sort of like a real house flip, right? Where we went right down to the studs, rebuilt the house, but then we also brought some additional land and we expanded the home with a few new additions. And what was really important here is that the foundation that we were laying would allow us to keep building into the future, right? So take this new version of the app and keep building on it to serve millions more users that will come on board over the next couple years. So by the way, if you have no clue what I'm talking about with all these analogies, very explicitly, right? So we rolled out the new Google Home app. It was in preview. Now it's available to everyone on mobile and tablet. Redesigned it from the ground up. We also rolled out a completely new home app on Wear OS with a preview on web, and you can find that at home.google. We built this incredibly powerful Android integration I'm excited to share as well, called the Home Panel. And so that's going to start rolling out with Pixel devices, including the brand new Pixel tablet and Pixel Fold. And lastly, but certainly not the least, a script editor. And this is for our most advanced users to be able to automate their homes. So lots of excitement and lots of progress here.
Yeah, we've got to talk about all of these. But one of the things you mentioned is you needed to redesign the home app for people who have dozens and dozens of smart home devices. At the same time, you'll have people who are doing their first steps in the smart home. Maybe they got their first smart bulb. So these are probably very different audiences, yet they're all using the same app. So how do you keep like both of these audiences happy?
Not easily, right? That's a tough problem. We spend countless hours thinking about how we do that. I shared last time that we're on this journey to land a multi-year vision for the Google Home platform, right? And how and what we build is both this art and science. It sort of incorporates an opinionated point of view of what we think the future of the smart home should look like and how it should work, and balancing that with user insight, user testing, and explicit, feature requests and things like that from users. So, we've transformed our development a lot over the last 2 years to ensure that we have a strong feedback loop at every step of the way. So I'll give you a couple examples. We started a rapid prototyping team. So very early in the process, we no longer just design the product anymore, but we actually build interactive prototypes that our teams use to test everything from how a smart home controller might lay out on different screen sizes, mobile to tablet to watches, to how a user might expect to interact with a new device tile on their favorites tab. So that was one. Now we then paired that with new rolling research processes. Now I think we've mentioned before, right? User research has always sort of been a core part of what we did. But what we changed was that we moved to this more constant cadence of it, right? So where we were running studies every few weeks, every month. And now we were doing that early research with actual prototypes that I just mentioned, right? So not just flat designs, but interactive prototypes. So the fidelity of that user feedback started to get a lot higher, right? So we can get really valuable feedback from the users that have just the one device and they're just getting started, as well as users who have a lot more. And the third example I'll give you is the one that you just mentioned, public preview.
Right.
So we shared a preview of the new app about 6 months ago. Think of it as a sort of a public opt-in beta, if you will. And this was a first for us. We ended up having over 500,000 users actually sign up and share rich feedback for us. And that's
great.
Staggering. Like I don't know that we expected just that volume of sort of like passionate interest in the new version of the app. And that was incredibly powerful. There's only so much you can test in these like small environments, right? So in particular, when you support thousands of devices for millions of users, it can just end up in these endless permutations of a home. And then we use that feedback. We use that feedback to make something like 50. You asked earlier, what we've been doing over the last few months while we've been preview. We've been taking that feedback and we've been updating the app, right? So we made something like 50 plus usability and feature improvements. So for example, the ability to favorite an automation, the ability to favorite group lights, improvements to camera history, scrolling. Users had shared feedback around some iconography not being as clear as that they would like. So we updated iconography. So all of that was a direct result of preview users giving us feedback over the last couple of months and our teams iterating. So can't wait for everyone to try this out as a result of that.
So that's amazing. Since the preview came out, we had at least 50 features that were changed or updated based on the user feedback.
Exactly. So over the last 6 months, while we've been in preview, we took all that feedback in, over 50 new features, usability improvements, iconography improvements. We worked to address hundreds, if not thousands, of bugs that users submitted via the app, and then major improvements to performance of the app, how fast it loads, how fast individual tabs load, camera live streams, things like that.
Speaking of camera live streams, it seemed to me just from using the app that cameras got a lot more emphasis compared to the older version of the Google Home app. Is that actually the case? And was that on purpose?
I'm glad you could tell. And of course, this is one of the things that I'm particularly excited about. In Nest's legacy, cameras, of course, have always been a major part of that, right? And now our cameras have just been a place where we've long made major investments in AI and ML, from object and people detection to stream optimization. So, we're continuing to invest very heavily in both our camera experiences, and with sort of like AI and ML as a sort of function of that. The Google Home app now lets you view your camera live views as soon as you open the app with no additional clicks, and very fast, I might add. So, this is an example where user feedback was actually incredibly valuable. So I'll give you a really good example here, Rashid. So users that had just cameras,
Mhm.
especially if they had just used the Nest app before, were very comfortable with seeing all of their cameras on the first tab.
Right.
Pretty obvious.
Mhm.
But users that had more smart devices other than cameras told us, hold on a second. If I have all my camera streams at the top, then that takes up all of the screen real estate.
Right.
Now then I need to tap and scroll and do a bunch of, interactions before I can do something as simple as turning off the lights. So, this is a balance of, again, very distant needs of different kinds of users. So going back to, one of our key design principles, give users their home their way, how we decided to approach that problem was by bringing live streams to the home app via favorites, right? So if a user cared about a particular camera, they could favorite it. And if they favorited it, they saw the live stream on app start. And then they could reorder it alongside all of their other devices in the right order for their needs, right? Fully customizable. That's an example of how both the investment in cameras plus the investment in giving users choice resulted in what we think is a much better experience for users.
Yeah, and thanks a lot for that. Obviously, the baby room is on top of my favorites, so we can keep an eye on that.
Spot on. Same for me. Kids room right at the top. And bringing live streams obviously was a major investment. Bringing it to the first tab of the app, it requires a number of sort of like performance heavy improvements. But by no means was that where we stopped. When you actually click into the camera controller, one of the things that users have shared a lot of feedback on that they really, really love is that we brought the Nest's sort of famous vertical video history scrubbing feature over from the Nest app into the Home app. So what that means is, users can now very quickly scroll through their footage as needed. And I mentioned earlier, right, performance improvements were massive here. So the team spent a lot of time improving the latency of our live feeds. The combination of experiences and performance hopefully ultimately are delivering that set of delightful user experiences that we talked about at the start.
I guess we could walk through the tabs that are, at the bottom of the app. So we talked about favorites and how great it is if you like cameras or any other sort of smart home device that you put in there in your favorite order. So the second tab is devices, where I get, I think, a per room view of all the devices I have. What would you say is the biggest change there compared to the older app?
Let me actually just give you a little bit of context on why we even got to those tabs.
Sure.
I mentioned earlier, we thought of this redesign as laying the foundation for the home app for the next few years of our smart home journey, right? And that we'll continue to build on as Matter continues to gain even more momentum. And so the 5 tab architecture and sort of like organization of the app is very related to how we see smart home evolving over time, which is that users will have more and more devices in their home, right? 50, 60, 70, like all of your appliances over time are just going to become smart and connected and come into the home app. With that being said, you're not actually going to use every device every day in the sort of same way. And that's why you sort of had to balance having, a single place where all of your devices would live, with the ability to get to the ones that you use sort of on a daily basis. And that's sort of the two sides of the coin. Like, I think of the favorites tab and the devices tab as sort of two sides of a coin. On one side, the devices tab serves as this place which is single place for everything. And then the favorites tab is the place to surface the most commonly used devices that you'll use on a daily basis. So the favorites tab will give you, quick access to all of your top devices, camera live streams. We talked about that, your automations and your actions. And then the devices tab will be that repository for everything, all of your Matter devices. And it's also a starting point to the controllers for each of those devices. And we made some big updates to the controllers as well. So with this update, we support something like 60 new device types, or increased support for 60 device categories.
So what's an example of a device that I can control right now from Google Home that I couldn't 6 months ago?
Where do we start? You can open or close your garage doors and your gates. So for my parents, very, very exciting. We've made updates where you can now use a precise slider to actually allow the right amount of light through your curtains or your blinds. You can check whether your washer is in wash or spin cycle before pausing it. You can toggle an ice maker. You can switch modes on your air purifier, your dehumidifier. So, just a couple examples for the kind of breadth we're building into the app, because we think that all of that coming into Google Home ultimately makes things like your automations much, much smarter. Because let's go back to the sort of the end goal here, just making all of your devices smarter and bringing them into the app so you can control each one individually. That's not the end goal, right? Like, I think we talked last time about the real goal with the smart home, and the vision for it is make everything smart so that you can ultimately make them all work together versus working just individually. And so that's where, automation will start to play an incredibly powerful role moving into the future.
Always feel that third tab with automations sort of is where the magic happens. But it has to be, I guess, in a way where it works for the rest of us. I think there are probably people listening to the pod right now who have some smart home experience, and they've actually been coding their smart home on other platforms. And that's maybe great for them, but not so great for, as I mentioned, the rest of us. So how do you make sure that it's powerful enough yet easy to use?
Yeah, and listen, we are definitely building for both the rest of us and those folks you talked about. We can come back to that advanced group in a second, but yeah, the third tab in the app is the automation tab, and I agree with you. I think this is where a lot of the magic is going to happen, right? Where it's going to be about getting devices to work seamlessly together. I think the big challenge for all of us in the industry is how do you make that a lot easier for folks? And we think we're taking a first step there, but we're just getting started. Now, the automation tab is and household routines is sort of where you can get all of your smart home devices to act as triggers and actions. So, for example, you'll be able to do things like set a schedule for your sprinklers to turn on, and then set a timer, and then make an announcement that you've started watering your plants. Right. You can set a routine that automatically closes the garage door when somebody leaves their home at a very specific or time of the day or within a certain time range. So bring more devices into Google Home for our users and let them work all well together. And the automation tab and household routines, we're going to make that simpler and simpler over time, but more powerful under the hood. And the idea is that you've got to make it super easy for anybody to get started with something like an automation, not just the folks who can do the advanced scripting and things like that.
Exactly. And it shows that it is easy to use. But then, indeed, those more advanced folks, they probably care about the script editor that you mentioned before. I think most people are wondering, like, okay, so what kind of scripting language is that? Can I learn that? And what sort of benefits does it offer for those people who like to spend time in that kind of environment?
Yeah, the automation tab, very much for all of us,
Mm-hmm.
but we've definitely had sort of a cohort of power users that have been really excited when we shared back in the fall that we were working on a script editor, and so that's about to roll out to preview this week.
Cool.
And so what we did is we built this script editor to give that cohort of users, those early adopters, those power users who really want to invest in getting it very precise, to give them more control over their home automation. So it's early days for us here, but this tool what it's going to do is it's going to provide a new way to create very quick and edit really powerful home automations using a language called YAML. And so you can easily create scripts for advanced automations with even more device traits, conditional logic, and actions that aren't even available in the app just yet.
And I'm guessing you're putting that in preview first because you'd like to hear from those expert users to see, what's great and what could use some more work, perhaps.
Absolutely. And you know what? I expect and I hope that set of users will be incredibly opinionated and share a lot of feedback. But yes, that's coming to preview on home.google. So that's Google Home on the web, and we're bringing that to the mobile apps on Android and iOS as well.
Amazing. So those advanced smart home users better check that preview out. Absolutely. You also mentioned the home panel, which sort of existed in a way, I guess. So what is new there? And especially, I think, in the context of the Pixel tablet coming up.
Okay, first off, the Pixel tablet and the dock.
Yes.
It's a game changer. I'm excited that I can actually talk about it now. That's really cool. But I've had the pleasure of using it for over a year now. And I cannot wait for people to get their hands on it. So, to start with the basics, great app ecosystem is absolutely critical for this tablet. So we invested a lot in actually optimizing the Google Home app for both landscape and portrait orientations. So you'll see that all of the tabs, have this nested navigation bar, so that users can move around really quickly regardless of the orientation. We made some deeper investments in things like the camera timeline. So you can actually see the camera viewer off to the left, the timeline on the right. So, better utilization of the screen real estate that you get from a larger screen. And Pixel tablet and Android tablet users will see these updates rolling out this month. So that was very much a starting point. But, then drawing from, many of our learnings from smart displays, we kind of asked ourselves, when this tablet was docked, right? So one of the most unique things about the Pixel tablet is it has this awesome dock. So when you're not using it, it sits there, it charges, it acts as this great speaker. So when it was docked, could we actually make this tablet even better to control your smart home? And so that was the seed of a thought for a small part of our team that was sort of thinking about this. And what it resulted in was what we call this new home panel. And what that is it makes controlling your smart home much faster, and it does that by giving you this really quick access to the home app, your home app favorites, with only a tap on this home icon that you can see at the bottom left of your device lock screen, right? And the home panel brings you quick one tap access. You get your favorites, you get your spaces, and you get it directly from the lock screen, right? So think about your experience today, right? So today, when you want to do something in your smart home, you go to your phone, you pick it up. You unlock your phone, you type in your PIN, or you authorize with your face. You scroll through a couple screens to find your app. You open the app, you wait for it to load. We took all of that and condensed it into one tap, and you get your home. And we thought that itself was just an awesome experience, right? So we made it so much faster to get to your lights or your lock or your cameras. So that was a major part of that investment. Now, again, that dock part of the Pixel tablet is so unique. So when the new Pixel tablet is docked, what the home panel does is it actually turns your tablet into a smart home controller, right? So from hub mode, the entire household, right? So myself, my wife, my kids can very easily control access to a light switch, turn off a plug or whatever it might be. And then when someone does something like rings a doorbell, anyone in the home can actually see who's at the front door. You get this beautiful proactive full screen notification. You can very quickly answer with two-way talk, with quick responses. And so you can access the home panel from the Pixel lock screen. Gives you faster control, faster access to your devices. When it's in dock mode, you get a bunch of additional experiences that are communal for the home, which is really, really exciting. So that's the home panel. We'll roll that out on the Pixel tablet. But by the way, this is coming to the rest of our Pixel portfolio as well. So I personally have been using it on my Pixel Fold, and it's a fantastic experience. It's coming to the rest of the Pixel portfolio of phones and devices as well.
Anish, the previous time we spoke, we spent quite a lot of time on Matter. We said it is the future of the smart home. I think we spoke in 2022, and we sort of felt like 2023 is going to be the year of Matter. So how are we doing? And what's the next step in creating that ultimate smart home with Matter?
some of the things that we talked about last time, just to recap, right? So Google, was very much a founding member of the Matter Consortium, and we remain huge believers in the potential of Matter and the future of Matter. A lot of that is already here, right? A lot of the promise of Matter was to make it easier, faster, more reliable, more interoperable for your smart home, and we're already starting to see a lot of that value. So we have since rolled out some big Matter investments, from fast pair right in Android to set up all of your Matter devices, to supporting Matter on a number of Nest hardware devices, set up and control in the Home app of some of your Matter devices on Android, and now actually with this update, users will be able to use an iPhone to set up their Matter devices in Google Home. So with the arrival of iOS 16.5, it essentially no longer matters what smartphone you're using, pun intended. Our Google Home users will be able to set up any Matter device, regardless of whether they're using Android or iOS. And so this is something we at Google Home are very proud of. It's a win for users, and by no means the extent of our investments in Matter. We're continuing to invest heavily in improving the Home app, making it a much better controller for Matter, thinking about the next set of Matter devices that will come into the ecosystem as well.
Right. I think it's important for people to understand it's not like, okay, now Matter has been launched and that's the end of the story. It's basically the beginning of the story right now.
Absolutely. And part of that is, we've talked about Matter and the promise for a number of years. I think towards the end of last year, that's when you started to see and started to realize that it was a real thing, right? All of the major providers launched support for it. A lot of the smart home device manufacturers have rolled out their devices with Matter. So absolutely, we're in early days of the early innings of Matter, and excited to continue on that journey.
Anish, we have something brand new. We have super fans of the Made by Google podcast and, of course, of the Pixel portfolio and the Google hardware portfolio. And they have sent in questions. So we have two of them. They're for you.
Cool.
So let's see how you're going to do with those. The first one is from Colin from the UK. And he's asking, with the increase in smart devices and home automation, what design features did you take into account for the design on the Google Pixel tablet?
I'll talk about two of them. There were a number, but to give you sort of two examples, on phones, users use the Home app in one orientation, right? In portrait orientation. On tablets, it's quite different. Users switch between orientations, and you've got this much larger screen. So one of the fundamental parts of redesigning the Home app for the tablet was, hey, we've got a lot of real estate when the tablet is in this landscape orientation. How can we deliver better experiences that make use of that real estate? And so I think a good example of this is the camera controller. So if you switch your tablet into landscape orientation, you'll see the camera experience adjust, where you've got this beautiful large viewer off to the left, and we've adjusted it so that the timeline sits on the right, and it actually makes it very usable. You can sort of scroll with your fingers or your thumbs on the right side. So that's one example. I think the other example is what I mentioned earlier. The Pixel tablet has this unique property of having a dock.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing about the dock is that when a tablet is docked, you're actually interacting with your smart home controls at a slightly different distance than you would when you're holding your tablet in your hand, right? So if you think about it, when you have your tablet in your hand, it's kind of like a book. You've got it about a half a foot or so away from face, and your interactions, the touch targets can be a particular size. But when you put it on a dock, you tend to, what we saw in user research is that users tend to interact with the device at probably arm's length.
Mm-hmm.
And so to get really good usability, your touch targets had to be sort of larger to account for that. And so that's another example of how, from our labs, from our user research, we started to understand these distinct patterns that users have and ensure that device tiles and things like that were larger as they moved to that docked state of the tablet compared to a phone.
Amazing. I love that kind of attention to detail. And the second question we had from one of our super fans is from Anthony. And he says, is there a way to limit what you can do with the home ecosystem? I would love to restrict what devices my son can activate where they couldn't with a traditional switch.
You know what? That's a great feature request. I've actually been thinking about it a fair amount recently. My kids are still young, so we don't let them touch our phones just yet, but I can see myself even needing that. But listen, more granular controls for users in the home. That sounds like what Anthony's asking about. We don't have that just yet, but it's something that our teams will look at. So hoping to be able to build that out and share more with folks over time.
Amazing. So thank you, Anthony, for the feedback. Something we're going to think about for the future. Anish, as you know, before we wrap up, we always ask our guests, what is a top tip for users to try out on the product they're working on? So we have this brand new Google Home app, a lot of more stuff coming up shortly in preview. What would you say to our listeners? What is the top thing they should try in the Google Home app?
I'll give you I'll give you an anecdote first, and then I'll give you a tip second.
All right.
So the first one is sort of a funny story. We've had a few users over the last couple months mistakenly opt out of preview.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they were in preview trying out the new app, mistakenly opted out. And boy, did they panic, right? This actually happened to my wife too. She was using the new app. All of a sudden she, hit the wrong button, opted out, and she was like, whoa. And what we heard was that people were just clamoring to get back to the new version, because what they told us was once you started using the new one, you just couldn't imagine going back. Now, obviously that's feedback from a few users. I'm hoping that everyone will feel that way over time. So perhaps one tip is just the new app does make it significantly easier to work with your home compared to the older version. So that's one. Now, the actual tip for me is the combination of the home panel and favoriting a few light groups is the fastest I've ever been able to turn on and off a light sitting on my couch. So what that does is right on my Pixel device, bottom left, there's a little icon, tap home, and I can turn off all the lights in my living room. Fantastic. That is one of my favorite sort of features as of now.
Yeah, just think about doing that with manual switches across the room, indeed. So that's much faster, indeed.
We talk on the team that, aspirationally our goal is to make it as easy to control your smart home as a switch on the wall. And I think we're getting really close there. This home panel and favoriting light groups, you're starting to get to a place where you're actually maybe competing a little bit with the switch on the wall. So that's a good outcome for all of us, I think, for users, certainly.
Definitely a good sign. Anish, thank you so much for coming back to the Made by Google podcast. I have a feeling this won't be the last time. So hopefully you'll stop by again to tell us what's new in Google Home.
I have a fantastic time every time we talk, Rashid. So thank you for having me back on. And absolutely, I'll be back very soon.
So, Home Panel coming to Android 14 devices, and once again, the latest home stuff is in preview for you to try out. So in case you speak some YAML and want to have even more control over your smart home devices. Now, make sure you're a subscriber to the Made by Google podcast, so you'll find our latest episodes right in your podcast app. We still have a couple of episodes to go this season. They're gonna be great. So thanks a lot for listening. Take care and talk to you soon.